Welcome to Secure Freedom Radio. This is Frank Gaffney, your host and guide for what I think of as an intelligence briefing on the war for the free world. A man who's been in other phases of that war, other facets of it certainly, in uniform, in fact, the uniform of the United States Rangers of the Army. He is a man who is now serving on the House Armed Services Committee in the House of Representatives and representing the people of the 5th District of Oklahoma, is Congressman Steve Russell. He distinguished himself in uniform. He's distinguishing himself now in the congressional environment, and we're always delighted to have him with us. Congressman, welcome back. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you, Frank. It's great to be with you.
I'm anxious to talk about many things, particularly related to the sort of theater in which you've spent a lot of time. But before I do, the theater you're in at the moment is pretty high drama, too. Any thoughts at the moment and where we are with respect to the Republican leadership in the House? A decision that will be made, I guess, formally on Thursday of next week.
Well, it will. We've got a big day on that day. I know there'll be lots of discussion. I think really the backdrop, a lot of it is, who has offered themselves as candidates? What are our choices? And what are the things that we have remaining to do by the end of the year? And all of those things are factors. And, I understand the anger of everybody. I mean, no one understands it more than those of us in Congress who receive it on a daily basis. But, this notion that somehow we're not listening or we don't care or all of that is just absurd. And the American people are really not informed on the inner workings of Congress and how it works. And I would dare say that McCarthy, if you had asked people, who is Kevin McCarthy 2 weeks ago, 99% of America probably couldn't even have told you who he was. And now suddenly they all have these opinions about it. And so it's really rather fascinating to watch the dynamic.
They're being informed for good or ill by some of the things that he's been saying and doing lately, but there'll be more opinions yet between now and Thursday, I'm sure.
Well, and we'll see some of that play out. And I am only aware of two people that have put their name forward, which would be McCarthy, and Webster is also one of the candidates and among those, I've not heard any other. I certainly, have been called and contacted by all kinds of people that if McCarthy were to go to the speakership, that would open up, of course, other races, and then everybody is swirling on that, and that seems to be getting a lot of attention.
It will, and we'll be looking forward to covering it here, of course, and perhaps talking with you about it in the near future as well. Let me turn to, though, the immediate issue that I was very anxious to visit with you about, and that is the developments that are taking place. As I mentioned, you served in uniform, notably in combat in Tikrit, and were directly involved with the folks who brought Saddam Hussein out of the rat hole, as I recall, the subject of your book, We Got Him, a memoir of the hunt and capture of Saddam Hussein. What do you make, Congressman Steve Russell, of what we're seeing the Russians do at the moment in Syria and with the Iranians, of course with Bashar Assad, but also with the people that you used to work with, the Iraqis?
Well, it should not be surprising that Russia is involved, as you and I have discussed, I believe, even on this radio show. And we certainly, I have been saying, 12, 14 months ago that Russia will have an interest there because of the naval base at the port of Tartus. They have the air base at Latakia. They have interest there. And now that you see the rebels within striking distance of some of that, well, it's striking to me that our own administration acts surprised that Russia moved troops there to protect it. And I am really saddened at how amateur this administration is when it comes to that region and foreign policy. We missed an incredible opportunity more than a year ago, where, okay, we've got our differences, Crimea, Ukraine, disaster, got that, we're anti-Russia on that, get that. But with terror, we still share intelligence with them, Frank. With the war on terror and all of these Islamo-fascists that are out there, there is a large group of nations that cooperate, and ISIS certainly is chief among the worst of these. And so the missed opportunity more than a year ago was, look, we know you have your naval base there at Tartus. We know you're going to protect it. If you start in Damascus and work your way to the Iraqi border, we'll start in Baghdad and work our way to the Syrian border, whether that's through advising, whether that's through whatever it is. We could have squeezed ISIS out much, much earlier, and we could have done something a lot more, long-lasting. And then you worry about the governments and the geopolitical after that. That doesn't mean you have to remain and stay. We also misread Russia's interest there, and I'm not trying to be a Putin apologist. That's the last thing I would be. But you have, like our bases that we have overseas, you have a community that has grown accustomed to Russians. You have intermarried populations and cultures. You have decades of Russian presence in that area. And so for us to just think, well, oh my gosh, the Russians have come into Syria suddenly. Hello, they've been there for 4 decades.
Steve, let me ask you about one other piece of this equation. You talk about us moving in Iraq. One of the outfits that apparently the Russians are sharing intelligence with at the moment, and from what you say, it may well be ours, is Iran. They've been partnering in propping up their shared ally, Bashar Assad. Do you have concerns about the role that Iran is playing in all of this at the moment?
Of course, I do. I mean, Iran, as you know, I have and continue to oppose the president's executive action on this Iran deal. We are still very much in play with stopping it. I was a original co-sponsor on Patrick Meehan's bill that he did yesterday so that no funds could be sent out before settlements on terror victims were paid. A fantastic measure. I also dropped my own bill that would prohibit any sanctions being lifted with the Iran Terror Financier Transparency Act. And, so we are very much still in this fight. But Iran, they are going to continue to fight proxy wars. They're going to continue to destabilize folks in the region. They're not going to change that behavior. We don't need to embrace them. In terms of intelligence, it's kind of a two-edged sword. On the one hand, they have agreed to share intelligence with both Baghdad and Tehran with Russia. I'm kind of heartened by that because we'll have a chance to read it.
Well, that's an interesting thought.
Well, I mean, I'm being facetious there, but we will be able to penetrate that more than likely.
Let me ask you, in connection with the work that you've been doing, and it's highly laudable to counter this Iran deal, you've also recognized the importance of what states, I believe, like yours, Oklahoma, have done to impose prohibitions on investment by their public pension funds in companies doing business with Iran. This is something that's supposed to go away pursuant to the Obama bomb deal. Congressman Steve Russell, do you think that the states will be able to stand up against the pressure that the feds are going to produce?
We have 15 states now that have signed on to the efforts that we're working. Attorney General Scott Pruitt from the state of Oklahoma and Bill Schuette from Michigan, they were the initial two. This effort is being led by Oklahoma, and now we have 15 states. I believe Indiana was the last one to join. The president says this is not a treaty. We agree with him, and because it's not, the supremacy clause does not hold true. And consequently, I mean, if you go back to Medellin versus Texas, the Supreme Court affirmed that states have, they have the absolute rights in these cases. And so we are very encouraged by it.
Congressman Russell, we have run out of time before we run out of things to talk with you about. I appreciate so much your time and your service to our country, particularly that in uniform, but that you're also providing today. I hope you'll come back to us again soon. And in the meantime, good luck with the fights here and elsewhere. God bless you, sir. We'll talk with Dr. Leon Uris next. We'll get into Putin's patriotic mobilization right after this.